everyone. Welcome to Get Centered for our July seasonal episode. Today, I want to talk about taking a break and what is inside a pause. What is allowed to come to life when we take a break and we take a pause. At the very least, we can think that we might be restored, but at the most, we might think a dream could come to the fore or maybe even come to life. We might have a massive realization. Taking a pause, taking a break is not doing nothing. It tends to be looked at through this lens of laziness or quitting, when in fact, it's a lot that's going on. What we're doing when we take a break is we're resourcing, we're filling up a cup that is almost empty or maybe has been empty for a very long time. We're tending to the flame of our vitality. We are recharging the almost literal battery of ourselves. And I have heard it said before, I wish I could credit whoever said it, that, gosh, when our electronics are running low on charge, we put them to sleep or we turn them off or we put them on a charger so that they have more juice for the next period of time. And yet we seem to have a really difficult time doing that for ourselves. And what I want to acknowledge is that taking a break, taking a pause is not a luxury, it's a responsibility. It's our responsibility to ourselves and to our collective. When we attempt to offer our resources from a place of not being resourced ourselves, certainly we don't have as much to give. We might even be giving from such an empty place that what we're trying to give is falling flat, despite our best intentions and best efforts. And I feel myself really reflecting on where we were about a year ago now with COVID and quarantine, and with all the caveats aside about how devastating that was for so many and still is for so many. What a forced break and teacher that period of time was. Remember all the creativity that came from that, all the expansiveness. People were being inventive and coming up with whether it was a new business idea, how are they going to serve their people, their communities, their clients, their patients in a way that they had to just come up with practically on the spot. People engaging with their families in ways that maybe they hadn't in a very long time. And certainly that forced break created a quiet and an openness and a spaciousness that allowed for certain things to come to the surface. And, some people didn't really love that. Uncomfortable stuff was coming up and that felt like torture to them. Other people relished in that, and some people maybe got a little bit of both. But to see today how the traffic is getting to be thicker and thicker and calendars are getting fuller and fuller, I'm a little concerned that we're going to just walk away from what the opportunity aspect of what COVID and quarantine brought to us. And so because we are a Western culture who likes to know the why and explain to me why this is going to help me to take a break, just briefly, short list of benefits to resting: improved mood balance, stronger immune system, better weight control, and optimized brain function. So there's a whole lot more than that, but just to kind of put it in a nutshell, if that doesn't convince us to take a break and to pause, I don't know what would, right? But I'm less concerned with what we can measure and more concerned with the empirical evidence of what Mother Nature has to show us and teach us when we observe her rhythms. And the fact is that we can't do certain things. We can't hit the books to learn certain things. We can't perform certain things. Certain things have to wash over us. And for the washing over us to happen, we have to take a break. We have to be still and quiet. I know for myself, that's when the really massive downloads come in for my life, is when I'm quiet and take a pause. So that's where these deep mysteries lie. And um, John, you hit on this a little bit in your segment, how there's a feminine aspect to all of this, this uncontainable, amorphic, um, sort of intangible part of life and part of ourselves. Um, this part of our nature is just as important as all the parts we can see and touch and measure. But because we can't see it, touch it, measure it, we tend to ignore it or push it to the side or think of it as less important because of the world we live in, which is like produce or die, make sense of the space you take up on this planet or get off of it. So we really have um, it's very real, and just want to validate for people who have a difficult time taking a break, you are coming up against resistance there. So it takes a really strong commitment to this break. But why are we talking about it now? We just talked in June about the heat of summer and the vigor of that. So why all of a sudden are we talking about taking a break? Well, it's because of this Taiji symbol that you're looking at. What you see on the face of it is two sort of paisley shapes snuggled up next to each other, and each one has a speck of it, the opposite's color. And what we dualistic humans see are two different things side by side. But what it is this is one thing. These two sides are each other. They're absolutely one and the same. However, they have a multitude of expressions within that sameness. The white side represents the time of year that we're in. Because life likes to present in fractals, we can think of it like this. The biggest part of the white paisley could be high noon. It could be the summer when we're thinking about the four seasons. And like we said in our last segment, it could be considered the first half of life. But in that most high noon section of the white paisley, you see that black spot. That is there because it absolutely very much contains its opposite: winter, coolness, quietness. So what it's asking us to do, what Mother Nature, what this diagram is showing us, is that we don't need to go into full winter, but we do need to draw from winter a little bit. And so that can look like taking a vacation, right? It could look like taking a sabbatical, and a really big ask there, right? But wouldn't that be amazing? It could look like a plunge in a cool pool in the middle of the heat of the day. I would say that, just even to organize my thoughts, prepare my thoughts for what I'm saying now, I needed to take a break. I needed to not do anything. I mean, the most that I did was I took a walk and I sat in silence and meditated to try to allow something to come in to wash in. So there is something really deeply powerful and meaningful that that comes from this quiet, that is not separate from the vigor of life, the action and the doing of life, the learning of life. But this informs that. This, allowing for this, makes that all the more rich. So let's open it up to the group and talk about possibly ways in our own lives. Maybe y'all have some examples of times in your life where you took a pause and something really magical or powerful came to you as a result of that.
I think in a way, any form of therapy is a pause, whether it's psychotherapy or going to an acupuncture appointment or whatever. We do have to put our life on pause. And now that people are going back to the office, and it isn't even as easy as necessarily just getting on Zoom, we have to stop these activities and devote some time to let something come up. So I think all forms of therapy are exactly what you're talking about.
I think what I've seen in my clients is like, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to like do 20 different things, and I'm like, whoa, have you scheduled or wedged in time to just take a break? They're like, oh, I don't need a break. I can just like keep going, keep doing, and then when they go to bed at night, they feel restless. They're like, I can't go to sleep. I don't know what to do. How do I? And they're like, I'm awake at like 2 a.m. in the morning. And I'm like, as much as we want to like keep going throughout the day and, with summer and heat and all of these components, it's like we want to be awake, we want to have fun, we want to do all of these things. But also, I tell them, we kind of need to let boredom or just specific times to kind of happen. Because when we overschedule or over exert ourselves, that's why we have a hard time scheduling time to rest, to develop a ritual, to just make time to kind of reflect on the our mind and our body well-being. So it's super important to just kind of prioritize that when we have those moments.
And they're so highly rewarded by all the doing. And
Hmm.
nobody, almost nobody, right? It's almost difficult, even in a well supported person's life, to find somebody who will say, "Oh, I'm so glad I didn't hear from you for
Right.
2 days, that you didn't, produce X, Y, and Z, that you didn't do
Mhm.
whatever."
Yeah, and I think that's something that society has dictated, I guess, over the course of decades. Is like we work hard so we can kind of provide for our family, which is understood. But you know, now that mental health, I think, has become such a great, you know, big, I guess, I don't even know how to quantify it, but now that everyone kind of wants to work on their mind and body, I'm glad that are new narratives for this so that people are aware of, hey, we need to just take a break.
I mean, even as someone who prescribes it, I have
Right.
a challenge myself.
For me, you'd think that I'm mindfulness. I teach mindfulness, and you'd think that I'd be really good at that, but I'm terrible. It's like that's why, that's why I need the mindfulness is because otherwise I will just run and run and run and run until the machine just falls apart. Like I think we all know that or know the feeling of just going and going and going until you just can't go anymore, and then the machine just stops. Which I think you're right. All y'all are right. It's like there's a stigma against. I mean, we talked about this before, but there's a stigma against depressed, right? If you go into the doctor's office and you say I'm anxious, like actually felt like this in the doctor's office the other day. I was, telling him I'm like a little struggling, and he was like, "Oh, anxious," and I was like, I didn't say anxious at all in any way, really, but I think that he knew somehow that like I would be able to stomach anxious better than if he had said like you're depressed or something, right? I think that he knew psychologically it's going to be easier to swallow if you say anxious, because anxious, like I think John talked about this at some point, anxious is like, oh, because you're so productive, right? Because you have so much on your plate, that's a good thing, right? But depressed, oh, that's low energy, that's not that productive, we don't like that much. And I'm thinking about that for myself and retreat, just actually taking time, even though it's scheduled, even though it is um, like formatted and structured. The bounds of the retreat are saying like I'm investing in this time just for me, right? Like now, not my question now is like, okay, Ariel, what do you do with the unstructured time, and are you just filling up the structured time and just being a good little boy and working hard during the structured time in the retreat? It's another question. But the retreat on its own does some medicine with, even if you treat it that way, which is interesting. But I think retreats are really like that. I think seasonal, quarterly retreats are so critical for ongoing care. Um, Quarterly is actually a great way to plan it. That way you don't miss it. And if you miss it, at least you're going to get, not more than half a year of distance between times. So
Yeah, Ariel, you said something important in there, that we even will attempt to structure our unstructured time. It's so uncomfortable to just sit in the sea of vastness and darkness and quiet and wait and let something come up, let something wash over us, or maybe nothing happens. Oh God, how terrifying. Right.
so let me read a book, right? Oh, we're reading now. No, now we're at the beach for the next half hour. So we're going to be at the beach for the next half hour, right? It's like, even in the being, we're like for X long.
Mhm.
We kind of want to put parameters around things.
There's this fella, Peter Kingsley, who wrote a book called In the Dark Places of Wisdom. And he borrows from Parmenides, who was in the 5th or 6th century BC. He was a religious fella who wrote about hesuchia. It's a Greek term that means stillness. And one of the most powerful spiritual practices that a lot of these initiates would do is called incubate. And incubation is when you go into a cave and you've fasted and you've prepared a lot. You don't just do this. And this is what's crazy. You need preparation to do this. You need like specialized training to do this. And what you do is you go into a cave for 3 days and do nothing. You sit in total darkness for 3 days, at least. And I imagine that's like psychotic inducing. I mean, you're going to experience a whole lot. And so one of the things that they taught is the kind of journey Persephone took to the underworld. And there are these various stages. Tibetans teach this too. There are stages that you go through. And so there's at least a training where you can, in your disoriented state, you can kind of prepare and understand the kinds of really overwhelming intrapsychic and somewhat psychotic images and affects that you will experience. And so stillness, you might be still, you might be still, but inside it is a journey to hell. I mean, it is the underworld, and our concept of the underworld is really shallow. These are folks that actually did journey to the underworld. And the idea of dying before you die was part of the spiritual ethic. And we don't do that. What we do is we imagine after we die, we're on one tradition, we imagine that we're in some kind of golden, shiny, happy, joyful place. And there are all kinds of ideas that we have of the afterlife. And I'm not criticizing any of those. Although what I am saying is that oftentimes what we do imagine in the afterlife is part of what we imagine will help us in this life. It's an anxiety reducer. And if we had a practice of, I think Layla Scott, this is really powerful. If we had a practice of stillness, it's pretty active. Because even when you were saying, like, if you're still and nothing is happening, something's happening. I mean, that's anxiety producing unless you've gone through you've been initiated into this training. So I really appreciate this this part of the talk and talking about stillness.
I loved what you said about the stillness being chaotic, in terms of internally, even though it's like, I think that's why so many of us don't want to slow down.
Totally.
I'll say that for myself, even. Like, I don't want to slow down my chaotic, like, life goings on, because internally, if I stop, I notice that there's also some crazy chaos, right? So, like, it's not that I get to avoid it. And I think that's what people who go to retreat will tell you, is that it's not like restful retreat respite. It's like work, right? It's chaotic, it's excitement, it's a lot of energy, it's psychic energy. And you may leave the retreat having shifted, right? I was thinking about this before, is like my retreat experiences, to speak to your point, Leo Scott, have been alchemical. They have, once I've been able to just sit, or force myself to sit, or be in the container where everybody else is doing it too, and now we're all going to do it together, right? It's like, it forces the alchemy. It's like, I have to take the fire that's in me and like address whatever that earth energy is that's coming in, and eat the snake, right? It's like, if I'm willing, and if I'm skilled enough, right, and I want to do that, and I can show up, and with a good guidance, then I can come out the other end totally different than when I started. And then there's the integration phase, right, with like the king and that image was so cool, because like there's one thing happening here, but then I still feel today that I'm unpacking 10-year-old retreat insight.
All of that heat and chaos that we project out into our busy day-to-day lives and onto the relationships we have outside ourselves. It can be, I mean, it's the only way to go as far as I'm concerned, but it can be terrifying and too much for certain individuals, right? To be like, actually, this is my internal chaos. This is my own relationship with myself. And to bring that heat inside instead of diffuse it out is really, really intense, really intense. And I was having this daydream really while you were talking about how retreat is work, you know, whether that's an hour of your day or a week of your life, quarterly or whatever. I was imagining, you know, saying to somebody, you know, like, I need to go on retreat, and them going, oh, wow, that is hard work. Happy to support you in whatever way that I can to make that happen. You know, like for the response to not be, ooh, how luxurious. That would be so
Right.
nice. Wish I
So
could go.
relaxing. Sounds relaxing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're like,
But
you've never been on retreat if you said that.
right. Right. But instead, wow, that's intense. Thank you for what you're doing. So I want to say to everybody, thank you for what you're doing. You know, those of you who do take breaks and bring the heat inside and let it burn. All right, everybody, this was our July Get Centered on taking a break. Take a break. Let us know if you need support with what comes up as a result of taking that pause. And please do subscribe, like, share these episodes if you enjoy them. And we're so grateful you're here.